Hello and welcome. Today we're going to speak about Kanban and my name is Henrik Yllemo. There are many reasons why we want to look at Kanban. Some of them is listed here. It provides a quick response to change. That means that we can respond to change really fast using Kanban. We can also avoid overproduction, which is always good. It's not good to produce too much and end up having queues of sorts. It helps to visualize the system and reveals problems. One of the key things with Kanban is to actually visualize where you have your bottlenecks, and the process of doing that is a really key part of Kanban. So this allows us to evaluate the effects of any process change. So we can do changes and we can evaluate the outcome of that change. It also allows us to identify bottlenecks, which is also a key of Kanban, to have identification of the bottlenecks, and we can also relieve them, making sure that we don't have too many bottlenecks. It also allows for the team to create confidence within the process, especially if it's a DevOps process. We can really have a confidence in Kanban to help us improve and make progress within the process. It also helps us to have sustainable pace when we do things, so we don't stress our resources and burn out our team too fast. So it's kind of a really nice list of things or reasons why we want to think Kanban. So the background of Kanban is coming from the Japanese language, and I hope those symbols here is representing Kanban. I don't know any Japanese, so I'm kind of hoping that this really nice symbols is Kanban. So we can see on the top here, this supposedly reads can and this reads ban, and that means it's card signal or signal card, maybe more correctly. So that's the background of Kanban. It was used in Toyota in the 1940s from this guy, Taiichi Ohno. He was the inventor of the Kanban system, which was a part of the lean manufacturing that Toyota had in the 1940s, when they really ran circles around the other car manufacturing industries. Is really making huge progress in this lean methodology, and Kanban was a key part of that. So Kanban was a method for change management in order to make changes happen and to track the changes. So in the simplest form, Kanban consists of a story card and a board, probably. But today you can see Kanban in lots of various different places. You can see it in stuff like this, a typical Kanban card, where you have lots of information, a story, and some telling of the stories and some estimates. You can also, if you visit your favorite coffee house, you can see that on the coffee mug here you have a name, and you also have some small checkboxes here. This is also a type of Kanban card or visualization story card. Also, when you're out flying, you can have like a boarding pass. That's also a type of story card. It tells you where you're supposed to be sitting, and that's also a bit of a Kanban methodology. The thing that made Kanban hugely popular was that this guy, Taiichi Ohno, really made a huge change within Toyota when he introduced the Kanban system. So how did he do it? Really, it comes down to three principles here, which defines how Kanban actually works. The first one being visualize the workflow, and the second one, limit the amount of ongoing activities, so you can keep the amount of activities at the same time at a certain number, and also measure the lead time and optimize the lead time. This is the three key principles of Kanban. From the 1940s, we now move to software development pipeline. Today we speak a lot about software development and how we can improve the pipeline of software development. Looking at this little tube here, we can imagine we have a tube here with things moving from the left to right here. We have lots of features that we want to develop. Within this software development pipeline, we do lots of stuff. And out on the other right hand side here, we have new updated software, pieces of software actually ready to be shipped. A typical scenario we might have is this, when we have 3 different states within the software development pipeline. We have this analysis state, and we have this development state, and we have the testing state. So imagine this scenario when we have the possibility of doing 10 analysis steps per week and 10 development scenarios per week, but only 5 per week in the testing state. That means that we have a bottleneck here. It means that things are kind of piling up. So the thinnest part of the tube is actually the testing state. That means that this is the maximum throughput that we can have is 5 per week because of this limitation within the bottleneck. So this is the things that we want to visualize within Kanban. Where do we have our bottlenecks? Meaning that visualization really is key in Kanban. So workflows are typically not very visible by its nature. It's something that we just do. We don't really think about it. But Kanban really helps us to visualize the workflows, how we do things. And that's really the core of Kanban. It allows for our co-workers, our team, to take a quick look at the Kanban board and the visualization cards and to see the state of the workflow. And the process is really divided into columns like this, just separate columns. And we have small cards that's visualized within the column, like something like this. And the cards are actually moved across the board from the left to the right hand side here. Following our software development pipeline here, we can see we have the typical story card, which is a card with a description of maybe functions and tasks of things we want to do within this card. And that this is how we typically do things. You have some kind of visualization card, and those cards are being transferred across a board. And typically you design a board with just having columns like this, defining all the way through the software development pipeline. So you have the analysis state here, we have 2 cards, and in the development we have 0, in the testing we have 1 card. So just looking at this board, we can see what the current state is and how the flow is actually moving. And if we have many cards just kind of stacked up in a huge pile, like here we have in the bottleneck in the previous example here, we can see that we can easily see if we have a bottleneck. One of the key things with Kanban is to limit the work in progress. This is done by something we call WIP limit, or work in progress limitation. We actually apply restrictions on the work in progress for each development phase, and the phases is kind of like the columns. So we put the restriction on each column of how many tasks at the same time we allow for being in that specific column. That allows also for a pull-based system. So if we only allow 1 task at a time in this column, another task can't move into this specific state unless it's free, it's been cleared. And that means that we have a clear focus on the capacity when the capacity is available. So this can't move into the next column unless it's free. This also makes a huge benefit when it comes to quality, because stuff like context switching is really sensitive within project management. That might be one of the hardest things to overcome, to not have too many tasks at the same time. Kanban is really nice when it comes to this type of quality, that you focus on your task. And it really should have some kind of definition of done that also made clear for you, so you don't have to do so many revisions. When you know you're done, you can actually move it into the next state within the Kanban. In our example here, in our software development pipeline, we now have put within each state, we have a work in progress limitation of 2 within the analysis, and 2 within the development, and 1 in the testing state. That means that we can only have 2 cards or 2 tasks within each column of the first 2 here, and 1 in the second one. That means that if I want to move this card into this column, I can't do that unless I move some other card and maybe finishing that before. That really puts the focus on the pull-based system, that this becomes the headache. You can't finish unless you finish up in the next state, so to say. So that's how you limit the work in progress. Another core thing with Kanban is to manage the actual flow, the workflow, that should be carefully monitored. And this is something that's typically done by, let's say, if you have a Scrum Master or an Agile coach or a project manager even, that can help you monitor this type of flow. And the measurements should be done in order to identify the problem, so you can keep the measurements over time, and you can use those measurements to get a better understanding of how the system works and how you can make improvement based on your measurements, your previous estimates. And it also can help you identify both the positive and the negative effects of any changes you might do to your Kanban board. One of those measurements that you actually can do is measure the accumulated flow, like having a cumulative flow diagram like this. When you measure each of the states and how long they take, so you measure the lead time of each state here, so you have a same type of aggregation here, so you have the cumulative flow from each ticket moving through the system. You have a cumulative flow, and you can measure each lead time of each ticket, and this can be used in so many different scenarios. We can actually calculate how long does it take for a ticket going into the pipe and from it's going out, what is the time of that. There's also a difference between lead time and cycle time. This can be described at the full length here. From the beginning, we have a ticket being stored, maybe in a ticketing system, until it's finished and ready for production. This is the lead time. So the entire time here, when you have the entire package from something is being created to the end, that's the lead time. The cycle time is more when you start your work until you finish off the work. So this might be the lead time here instead of the development and testing. How long does that take? So you can measure both the lead time and the cycle time. In order to measure the cycle time, you can use this nice little formula from a guy called Little and his law, Little's law, or Little's formula. It's a formula used in queuing theory. It works something like this. In order to calculate the cycle time, you need to divide work in progress, the WIP, with the throughput. So the work in progress in this case is 25. So we have 10, 10, and 5. Like in the previous example, and the throughput gives us 5 per week. So we have a throughput, when we have this work in progress of 25, a throughput of 5. It ends up having this calculation here. So we have 25 divided by 5 equals to 5. Our cycle time in this scenario is 5. So let's say we increase our work. We increase our work in progress to 30. That gives us a cycle time of 6. That means that we have a cycle time. It takes us 6, whatever we're counting, 6 days, 6 weeks, or whatever we're counting. So that means that it's not really necessarily just because we increase the amount of work, we don't get immediate effect. And that's something that we can prove using Little's law. So we want to have a good balance of throughput and work in progress without adding queues like we have here in the previous scenario. Kanban really doesn't speak so much about leadership, but it's a change methodology. So we need to speak about leadership as well. So in order to have a well-functioning software development pipeline within Kanban, we need to have some kind of backlog system, some kind of priority. So we need to have some kind of a backlog prioritization also going into the pipeline. So this is about leadership as well. And we need to have some way of measuring how long it takes before we get here. And we have not only have the correct things produced, but also the throughput and all calculations. And we want to have an ongoing discussion with the team of how we can improve our board, if we need to change something or adapt something to the board or to the cards or to the process or something like that. We also need to have some kind of leadership within the quality discussion to address technical depth and the definition of done. So this card can't move here unless this is checked and this is checked and this is checked. This type of quality checks needs to be implemented as well, and this is typically a leadership thing. And also if we have something being stuck here for some time, we need to have some kind of swarming ability and call for action, that the entire team should focus on this issue and try to resolve it as soon as possible for faster resolution. That's key things for leadership. And another thing, an advice more of sorts I want to send to the leadership, the project leaders handling Kanban, is kind of to avoid micromanagement. And in order to have more commitment from the team, it's about team, it's about teamwork. So it's not about giving instructions. It's the pull-based system, and it really demands that each individual within each resource within the team should feel a commitment. That doesn't really happen if you micromanage your team. There are many different examples of Kanban boards. This is a typical basic type of board, some kind of starting board. And one of the things with Kanban is you kind of want to adapt and change things along your board. And this typical example has 3 columns in it. We have to do, in progress, and done. And we also have a backlog. So this is a really basic type of board. This next example here, which I called board number 2, we added a number of columns. Just you can have as many columns as your team likes or needs or wants, but I would advise to not have too many, because it's really hard to visualize. If you have a really long board, let's say 20 or so columns, it's really hard to see, and it's really hard to have the correct amount of work in progress limitations as well. So we have this third board. Another thing you can do instead of having lots of different columns is that you can have columns within a column, so to say. So in this example, we have doing and done as 2 different types of columns within the column. Another thing you can do is that you can have your work in progress limitation. Maybe you don't want to have work in progress limitations on all your columns, but on the ones that's really sensitive and the ones that's really important, you should put a work in progress limitation. And in this scenario, we put the work in progress limitation to 2 here, and we have 3 cards. That means that if you have a digital board, this entire column should bright up in red and be highlighted in red and saying this is not allowed basically to have. Otherwise, if you have an analog board, just a whiteboard with some post-its on it, it's not really automatic when you see if it's been more cards than allowed within the work in progress limitation. So this example of board 5, we also have something called swim lanes. So we can divide the board in different lanes like this. So we have a lane up top here, and we have another lane on top, bottom here. This type of lanes can be described of various things. One of those popular things that I see people use a lot is to have an expedite lane, a high priority lane, when you use this lane in order to push things through. Let's say this card is extremely important. This is something that we really need to ship as soon as possible. Maybe it has a date limit, maybe it's just a stakeholder of high interest that we want to supply really fast. We can allow for things in this expedite column to have higher priority, saying that, okay, we have one card in the expedite lane. That means that everyone that can help move this card faster should really prioritize this card over the other cards. There is so many different versions of Kanban boards, and one of the key things here is that you actually can create your own type of boards based on various scenarios. And on this link here, you can see lots of examples being put together in a really nice format, graphical format, that actually shows you lots of different types of examples of boards. And on the right hand side here, we have this Kanban simulator here, which is a really nice tool in order to simulate the type of Kanban flow. So this Kanban board step by step is really a nice compilation of various Kanban boards. You can just scroll through it. It's a really nice collection of various examples of how a Kanban board might look. And you can really skim through it, and it's really great for explaining to people how, for example, work in progress limitations work. And if you want to have a proposal of your team to have a specific type of Kanban, you can really find them here. There's lots of pages here, so it's a huge collection of various Kanban boards. It's 153 pages of various types of Kanban boards. So having a look at this Kanban flow here, we can just play around with it a little bit here. We can increase maybe the work in progress of some things, and just press the start button here. You can actually see the cards is being randomized over the time here. And when everything is finished, we can see the calculated cycle times. We can actually follow up in this cumulative flow diagram, and we can actually see the work in progress results. Really nice and handy tool. Just before we close up for today, I want to explain to you a bit about the myths going on with Kanban. Some of the people I've seen during the years is really saying that the Kanban is a silver bullet and it works for everything. But for me, I think Kanban works with most other types of processes, and it's not really a silver bullet in that sense. It's not solving all the problems, but it's really huge when it comes to working together with other types of processes. If you have an established project management model that already works for you, you can use Kanban for that, and it also works you for leadership questions and for personal use as well. So it's working together with most other types of processes. So it's not a silver bullet, but it works really good together with lots of other stuff. Another one of those myths I hear is that you can't use Kanban when you do estimation. I think Kanban works awesome together with the estimations. You can use a backlog. We have estimations, maybe hours or days, or just a random amount of beers or something like that. And it works together with the work breakdown structure or product breakdown structure. You can have limitations here. You can have prioritization of this together as well. Another one of those is you have to choose either Scrum or Kanban. One of the things here is that you typically hear the word Scrum board. Scrum board it's basically a Kanban board that they branded as a Scrum board. So Kanban works really good together with Scrum. So you can use in the same way as you do iterations in Scrum, for example, you can have iterations in Kanban as well. You don't have to, but you can say a limitation. We have a release every 3rd week or something like that within Kanban, and whatever been ready for that period is going to ship as well. And instead of retrospectives, that typically retrospectives you have in Scrum, you can instead review the process and go about looking at the board and how are we going about this. Can we improve something on the board and in the process around how we work? And instead of having daily meetings, the daily meetings of stand-ups, you can also have the daily meetings but review the board instead, and have the entire team standing around and looking at the Kanban board and just discussing the problems on the board. One of the good things of using agile methodologies in general is that you can mix and match, and you can really find what's best suit you and your team. So in this example, work together with a customer, and we kind of mixed both in the project sense and in the governance sense, in a maintenance state of a solution. We mixed using a Scrum methodology for the new type of product increments that we were supposed to deliver. So, and we also had a part of that Scrum team as a Kanban team for more the maintenance, governance type of things. So we had an allocation within the Scrum sprints assigned for Kanban tasks. So we had a Kanban backlog as well within the Kanban backlog, and that means that we can pick off that backlog, but in case that comes in something new, like a support ticket or something like that, that's being managed within the Kanban flow, within the Scrum flow, because the team was really doing new development and maintenance at the same time. So we also had this express column within the Kanban board. On top of the Kanban board, within the swim lane, we have this express lane. And if something came in, if the ticket came into the express lane, that means that the ticket was higher priority than even Scrum. So it means that we had to focus everyone that can bring value to this ticket and make it move faster, really should prioritize that on top of everything else. That means that we couldn't have too many of those, of course, because it's kind of like puts a huge stress. So it's on the team if we have too many of them. But it's a nice thing to have some kind of expedite express type of thing. Another thing which is really great with this scenario, but we focused a lot on the quality and the technical depth and trying to automate as much as possible of the quality process and quality gates and stuff like that, in order to not increase the technical depth and rather decrease the technical depth by you doing the correct quality at any given time. So I want to thank you for looking into this with me. It's always good to have this type of review of a process. It's good for me as well to just clear out some things. I wanted to give you a few advices when you try to improve your Kanban process. And the first advice I wanted to give you is to focus should be on the value and not the tool. It's always good to have a digital tool, but the process, the value that the process actually establishes is not really tied to the tool. So you can strive to be more agile and not to be too dogmatic about your process. That's always good, that you shouldn't assume that your ideas is the correct one, because it's kind of like you want the team to experiment and find the improvements and actually collaborate to find the perfect solution for you. So that also means that you should begin where you are, begin easily and improve over time. Have a process of improvement built into your process, so you can start wherever you are basically and just work your way forward. My name is Yllemo, and I thank you very much for listening in to me today. In case you want to contact me, you can find my contact details here, and also my blog site here. And you can also subscribe on YouTube. That's always nice. So thank you very much. Until next time, have a great one.